She was told her whole life that she came from nothing, a baby left in a stranger's arms on the side of a Georgia road. No name, no family, no answers. For 30 years, that's the story she believed. But the truth was never buried in Georgia. It was buried in Texas, inside a family that had been searching for her since the day she was born. And when that truth finally came knocking, it didn't just change her life, it changed everyone who ever looked down on her. Some women are born into a legacy. Others have to survive long enough to find theirs. This is the story of a woman the world called nobody, and the secret that proved they were wrong all along. The rain had not let up in Savannah, Georgia for 3 days straight, and Corinne Ashworth had not slept in almost as long. She was 7 months pregnant, moving through the bus station with one hand pressed against her side and the other gripping a small cloth bag like it held her whole life. Because in a way, it did. She was not from Savannah. She had crossed 3 states to get here, and every mile of it had cost her something. A woman traveling alone, that pregnant, drew stares, but Corinne had learned to keep her eyes down and her pace steady. Whoever was looking for her did not know this city yet. She intended to keep it that way for as long as she possibly could. The bus was late, then it broke down twice, and by the time it rolled into the small town outside Savannah, where Corinne planned to disappear, she was doubled over in pain that had nothing to do with exhaustion. A woman named Pearl Mercer, sitting 2 seats back, had noticed her the whole ride. Pearl noticed everything. She ran the register at a diner for 11 years and had learned to read trouble on a person's face before they said a word. She leaned forward and asked Corinne if she was all right. Corinne said she was fine. Pearl did not believe her, but she also did not push. Not yet. By the time they reached the last stop, Corinne could barely stand. Pearl helped her off the bus and into the cold night air, and that was when the contractions started for real. There was no hospital close enough, no time to call anyone, and Pearl Mercer, a woman with no children of her own and a modest house at the edge of town, made a decision that would define the next 30 years of her life. She brought Corinne inside. She boiled water. She prayed out loud because she did not know what else to do with her hands. Odessa was born just after 2 in the morning, in a back bedroom, with nothing but a lamp and a frightened stranger's hands to welcome her into the world. Corinne held her daughter for exactly 40 minutes. In that time, she pressed a small gold pin, shaped like a sunburst, into Pearl's palm and made her promise 3 things: raise the child as her own, never let anyone take the pin, and never, under any circumstances, go looking for where it came from. Pearl promised all 3 without fully understanding what she was agreeing to. Corinne did not survive the night. No family came. No one asked questions. A grieving woman with no children became, by morning, married after losing her husband years earlier, and she had long since made peace with a quiet life.
All right, Odessa, press down with your palms. Now fold it over just like this.
Like this, Grandma?
That's it, honey. Keep going.
Raising Odessa gave that quiet life a purpose it hadn't had in a long time. Pearl ran a small kitchen out of her home to make ends meet, baking pound cakes, sweet potato pies, and yeast rolls that half the town swore by, and Odessa grew up with flour on her hands before she could properly spell her own name. By the time she was 16, she could bake circles around grown women twice her age, and everybody in town knew it. She was, by every measure that mattered to her teachers and her neighbors, exceptional. First in her class, kind to a fault. The kind of young woman people said was going to do something one day, usually followed by a sigh, because doing something required money nobody in that house had. Odessa sold pastries after school to help Pearl cover bills, carrying a basket door to door through the neighborhood, and never once complained about it, not even when boys her age teased her for smelling like an oven instead of perfume. It was on one of those basket deliveries that she first crossed paths with Marcus Kingsley, though neither of them understood yet what that meeting would eventually mean. Marcus's family ran one of the most respected Black-owned real estate and development firms in the state, the kind of wealth that came with its own zip code and its own set of expectations. His driver had stopped near her usual corner to fix a flat tire, and Marcus, hungry and restless, wandered toward the smell of her cinnamon rolls without knowing whose hands had made them. He bought one out of impatience and finished it in silence out of shock. He asked who made it. He was told a girl named Odessa. He didn't think much of the name that day. He would think of little else within the year. Years passed in careful, ordinary rhythm. Odessa finished school with honors and no money for college, so she kept baking, kept saving, kept believing her season was coming, even when it was slow to arrive. Pearl's old friend, a woman named Mavis who cleaned for wealthy families across town, mentioned one day that the Kingsley household needed a cook. Pearl sent Odessa that same afternoon with her certificate in hand and a prayer on her lips. Diane Kingsley, Marcus's mother, interviewed her personally, and within the hour, Odessa had the job. She was warned, kindly but firmly, about the family's expectations: neatness, punctuality, discretion. She agreed to all of it and walked into that kitchen the next morning, determined to be the best hire that house had ever had. She did not know yet that the man from the roadside, the one who'd eaten her cinnamon roll in stunned silence, was the same Marcus who lived there. Marcus recognized her the first night she served dinner, and the recognition on his face was unmistakable. Over the weeks that followed, what started as curiosity turned into something neither of them expected. He lingered in the kitchen longer than necessary. She found herself laughing more than she had in years. Diane Kingsley noticed the shift long before either of them admitted it out loud, and she did not approve. Marcus's family had long assumed he would eventually marry Vanessa Doyle, the daughter of one of their oldest business partners, a match built on decades of family alliance rather than affection. Diane watched her son fall for the cook and decided quietly that she would not let it continue. Diane called Odessa into her study on a Tuesday afternoon and did not waste time with pleasantries. She placed an envelope of cash on the table and told Odessa, plainly, that her son had a future already chosen for him, one that did not include a housekeeper's daughter, however sweet her cakes were. She told Odessa to take the money, disappear, and let Marcus keep the life that had been built for him. Odessa refused the money, but did not refuse the request. She told Diane she would leave, not for the cash, but because she loved Marcus enough not to become the reason his family turned against him. What Odessa did not know was that Diane had no intention of leaving anything to chance. That same week, while Odessa slept, her phone vanished from her nightstand, along with the only working number Marcus had to reach her. By the time Marcus returned from a business trip expecting to see her, Odessa and Pearl were already gone, having packed in a single night and boarded a bus north with whatever savings they had left. Marcus searched every place he could think of. He went to the small house they'd once rented. He went to the corner where he'd bought that first cinnamon roll. Nobody had answers. His mother offered comfort with one hand and relief with the other, and Marcus, heartbroken and confused, eventually returned to the demands of the family business, though something in him never fully let go of the question of where Odessa had gone, or why she'd left without a word. Odessa and Pearl settled in a new city with barely enough money to cover 2 months' rent on a small storefront. Odessa poured every ounce of grief into her ovens. She named the shop Whispering Oak Bakery, after the tree that had stood outside Pearl's childhood home, and she built it one exhausting 16-hour day at a time. There were months she could not pay herself. There were nights she cried into bread dough because it was the only privacy she had left, but she never once considered quitting, because quitting had never been an option she was raised to believe in. Word spread slowly, then quickly. A caterer discovered her pound cake and began ordering weekly. A local news segment on small Black-owned businesses featured her storefront, and within a year, Whispering Oak had a waiting list for wedding cakes that stretched 3 months out. Odessa hired her first employee, then her 5th, then her 20th. She sent Pearl on the first vacation of her life. She built, quite literally from flour and stubbornness, a business that would have been unimaginable to the teenage girl who once sold pastries out of a basket door to door. Through all of it, she carried the gold sunburst pin in a small box she kept in her office drawer, never worn, never explained, a piece of a mother she never got to know, and a promise she intended to keep for the rest of her life, even without understanding what it truly meant. 3 years after she disappeared from his life, Marcus Kingsley walked into a bakery in a city he was visiting for business, drawn in by a smell he could not place, and would later swear he recognized before he even saw the name on the awning. He ordered a slice of pound cake out of habit more than hunger, and one bite told him everything his memory had been trying to piece together for years. He asked the young woman at the counter who baked it. She told him the owner was in the back. When Odessa stepped out of that kitchen and locked eyes with Marcus Kingsley for the first time in 3 years, neither of them said a word for a long moment. He apologized before she could speak, for not looking harder, for not fighting for her sooner, for letting his mother's fear decide his life for him. Odessa told him the truth about the money, the threats, and the missing phone, and watched his face change from confusion to disbelief to quiet fury, not at her, but at how easily he had been kept from finding her. They spent that evening in her small office above the bakery, filling in 3 years of silence in a single conversation, and by the time Marcus left that night, both of them understood that whatever had been interrupted between them had never actually ended. When Marcus confronted his mother, Diane did not deny what she had done. She defended it, at first, insisting she had only been protecting the family's future. But watching her son's face, watching the years of unnecessary heartbreak settle over him, something in Diane finally cracked. She agreed to meet Odessa in person, expecting to find the same soft-spoken young woman she had once bought off with an envelope of cash. Instead, she found the owner of one of the fastest-growing bakeries in the state, a woman who had built an empire out of the very rejection Diane had handed her. It was during that meeting, while Odessa reached for her purse, that the gold sunburst pin slipped into view. Diane went pale. She asked, with a shaking voice, where Odessa had gotten it. Odessa explained, as she always had, that it belonged to a mother she never knew, a woman who died the night she was born. Diane's own mother, decades earlier, had worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy Texas family and had once described, in vivid detail, a family crest pin exactly like the one now sitting in Odessa's hand. Diane had dismissed it as an old woman's story for most of her life. She no longer could. What followed was a search that took Marcus, Diane, and Odessa far beyond anything they expected, eventually leading them to the estate attorneys of the Ashworth family of Houston, Texas, a Black American family who had built their fortune over 3 generations on oil land rights secured back when almost no Black family in the state was allowed to hold that kind of paper. The attorneys had spent nearly 3 decades searching for the last direct heir of that fortune, a woman believed lost the same year a cousin forged the estate documents after the family patriarch's death. That cousin had seized control of the Ashworth Trust through deception, forcing the pregnant, rightful heir to flee the state under cover of night, with nothing but a single family crest pin sewn into her coat. That woman was Corinne Ashworth. That heir, the one still growing inside her when she boarded a bus outside Savannah decades ago, was Odessa. Corinne's aunt, the last Ashworth elder still living, had never stopped quietly searching for the child her niece had carried, honoring a promise made the night Corinne disappeared. When she was finally shown the sunburst pin, there was no doubt left in the room. Odessa was not simply the daughter of a woman who died on a stranger's bed in Georgia. She was the last living heir to a family trust that had sat frozen for 28 years, waiting for a bloodline everyone assumed had been lost for good. Odessa did not walk into that inheritance chasing money. She accepted something she considered far more valuable, the truth of who her mother was, and proof that every sacrifice made for her, by a stranger on a bus and a woman named Pearl, who raised her as her own, had not been wasted. She chose to keep her bakery. She chose to keep building the life she had made with her own two hands. But she also chose to honor the family that had never forgotten her, using part of the recovered Ashworth Trust to fund scholarships in her mother's name, and ensuring that the story of Corinne Ashworth would never again be erased by silence. Marcus stood beside her through every part of it, no longer the son protecting his family's plans, but a man who had learned that love built through hardship outlasts love arranged through convenience. Diane, humbled by everything she had tried to prevent, walked Odessa down the aisle herself the following spring, standing where a mother should, correcting in her own quiet way the harm she had once caused. At the wedding, Pearl Mercer sat in the front row, wearing a hat entirely too large for the occasion, and did not care one bit, because the daughter she raised out of nothing but faith and flour was marrying the man she loved, carrying a name and a legacy she had built herself, brick by brick, cake by cake, promise by promise. And somewhere, in a story only Pearl and the sky above her truly understood, a mother who never got to raise her daughter finally got to watch her stand in the light.